Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. My guest today is Andrew Glazier. He's the president and CEO of Defy Ventures. In my view, Defy Ventures is one of the most refreshing initiatives that I've run into through happenstance. And I'm really excited to learn more about what you're doing at Defy. And I want my listeners to hear your story because it's a pretty amazing story. My take on what Defy is doing, and Andrew's going to clear this up in the next 30 minutes or so, is they're taking a very unique and somewhat contrarian view, but you could also argue an obvious sort of intuitive view on a chronic problem of recidivism that's working. And, this is clearly a chronic problem. So, anyone who is making an impact and creating difference against something as important as this is someone I want to talk to. So, Andrew, first of all, thank you for making the time to join the podcast and to talk with me, and welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, is it fair to say that the problem you're solving is addressing the chronic problem of recidivism? And as I understand it, there's broadly a population of 7 million people either in the prison or probation or parole system, and there's north of 30% of those people sort of go back into the system. So is that the problem that Defy is trying to solve? Can you frame that up before we get into what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think we come at it from a couple angles. I think from a metric standpoint, we look at recidivism, that return to prison rate. I think broadly speaking, we're trying to address mass incarceration, and the issue with recidivism is, after 3 years, more than half of people who go to prison in America are going to return to prison. More than half. That is a significant part of what keeps our prison population way too high, the highest in the developed world. Certainly there's stuff that happens before prison. We're very much focused on what happens in prison and after prison. But we're trying to solve this question of how can we start to reduce mass incarceration? And I think, and we're looking at it from the perspective of how do we help people while they're inside prison to get ready to come home, and how do we increase the opportunity available to them when they're home? Because if we can do that, when we do that, I should say, we have shown that we can dramatically reduce that recidivism rate to less than 10% after a year, less than 15% after 3 years, and so that is kind of the highest level we're trying to do.
So go ahead.
If what's buried in there, not too deeply, is really the human thing that we're trying to do, which is and which is frankly, I think, more compelling, which is how do we help people who may not have gotten a legitimate first chance in many cases, right, get access to a fair chance when they come home and be ready to seize opportunity to help them become the productive members of society that so many of them want to be. And then that has all these ripple effects on communities and families and society. That
right, because that's where I was going to go. It's like if the leading indicator is you're reducing recidivism, then that has a knock-on implication of reducing incarceration. So it's not like you just impacting an individual and giving them a second or, frankly, a second chance. But the success that you create then has a knock-on implication that's far beyond the individual. Is that the right way to think about it?
Absolutely. I mean, and let's put a finer point on that. Let's just start with a cost perspective, and then let's talk about the human perspective. From a cost perspective, though, I live in California. We run in 8 states, and if I could just take a moment to give the brief explanation of how it works. We deliver personal development, career readiness, and entrepreneurship programming for currently and formerly incarcerated adults. So for most of the folks we work with, we start providing the program while they're still incarcerated. When they come home, we continue programming with them to help them find the job, stability, and reentry. And if they want to start a business, which not all of them do, but 10% of them may pursue the launch of a business, we help them with that. And for all the other 90%, we are focused on helping them find sustainability and economic independence in reentry. So let's talk about costs for a second. To keep somebody incarcerated in California, where I am, it's $100,000 per person per year. $100,000 per person per year. Nationally, we spend, just astronomical sums of money, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on our carceral system and all the collateral impacts of that system, whether it's keeping somebody incarcerated, the cost of families, lost tax revenue that we would be getting, and on and on and on, right? So it's an incredibly expensive system. And so if we can change that, when we change that, right, we're making our country certainly wealthier, right? Our relationship with business is important because we believe that business has to be part of the solution. And they need to be part of the solution, and they should want to be part of the solution, frankly, because we're in an historic labor shortage right now. And we have all these people coming home who have a lot of talent, a lot of willingness to work, and they're not given opportunity to work. And for businesses, they're sort of biting their nose to spite their face because all the data out there, and there's a lot of it, points to this being a population, if they're looking for a job and they want a job, they're probably going to be a great worker. And they're extremely unlikely to cause you a problem. In fact, no more likely really than anybody else who doesn't have a history. And so we include the business community as volunteers in what we do because we're trying to change their mindsets too about how they can be part of the solution. And what I would say, we can come back to this a little bit later, is if business is not thinking about how they can employ people, they're complicit, and they're part of the problem. Let's come back to that one. So that's sort of from a cost standpoint, right?
Right. But stop at the cost thing, because I know where before you go to the second part, which is the human part, I suspect, right?
Yeah.
The cost perspective is like there's two things there. One is, so why do I care?
Yeah.
Like, I live in my little bubble here, and I'm probably like everyone else. My strategy is put my head in the ground. It's not me. It happens there. They're behind bars. It's like, keep him away. And I'm playing the cynic, of course. But and the other thing is, like, if any in the corporate world, if any company or any leadership team performed at this level of sort of failure, as in the prison system, pick any metric you want, which is by any measure like catastrophic failure, they'd be out of business. But they're not, right? So I mean, so I think you answered the question, why do I care? I mean, there's a massive, like, direct, straight line benefit to me as the non-incarcerated person who doesn't seem to want to look at this. Is that blindly obvious and fair?
I think that's all about right. I think the one thing I'd say is the system is performing as designed. Right. And because the system is designed to meet, despite having a centuries-old mandate for rehabilitation, right? The system is designed for removal, retribution, and deterrence. And so rehabilitation has only become something that anybody's paid any attention to probably in the last 15 years, 20 years, right? People can now get college degrees in many systems. I don't know if they can get them in all of them. But that's like within the last 20 years, you could further your education and get a college degree, right? Where there was any programming beyond making license plates, right? So let's not kid ourselves that the system is failing, right? It's failing by, I think, some common sense metrics of, like, well, do you want people to come home and be ready to reenter society, right? Failing on that metric, right? But we're not failing on the removal, deterrence. Well, I don't know about deterrence, but removal and retribution side, that seems to be going great, right? So, but that's where it gets to. I think when people, your point exactly, is like there's this other, it's hidden away. It's designed to be hidden away unless you or your family member is incarcerated, right? And then, I mean, it's still designed to be very difficult for you, but then, boy, do you know a lot about it, right? But if you don't have that interaction with the system, then, it's designed to not think about it. And then it's designed, and then our society and media wants you to be afraid, right? Because that's a story to tell, right? And look, I mean, none of us should want to go to prison, right? I don't want to go to prison, right? But at the same time, we create this narrative that everybody in prison is incorrigible, irredeemable, a terrible person who can never again be trusted with anything.
And is it fair to say the entire system sort of sends them that message day in and day out in every 100%. Interaction they have? So you're reinforcing and sort of calcifying a mindset.
Yeah, well, you go to prison, and the prison, first thing you lose is your humanity, and then you lose your self-worth, right? And so what you're told in prison is you're subhuman and you'll never amount to anything. You have nothing to offer the world, so good luck, right? Now, when people come home, this gets to this human question, right? You release somebody from prison with that mindset, you can imagine how that might not lead to success. Imagine showing up for a job interview, and your talking points are, I am worthless, I have nothing to offer you, can I have a job? Right.
And when you explicitly say it, it shows up in how you show up, right?
Right.
You feel worthless, you're gonna send that signal.
If that's the story you're telling yourself, right? That's a story that everyone's going to see in you, right? And so, what we try to do, what we work hard to do, and I think we have success doing this, is say, listen, you are a human, you do have value, you do have unique gifts and talents. In fact, you're an entrepreneur. So, what does it mean for you to be entrepreneurial? And now let's reflect on that. Let's do some deep personal reflection and work. Let's talk about what you need to do to get a job and be ready for that. Let's help you reframe your story, reframe your narrative from all liability, right? To, hey, listen, you have survived and persevered and showed grit through an incredibly difficult experience, right? That probably started well before your incarceration, right? And there's strength in that. And who do you want to be, and who are you now? And one of the guys who works for us here at Defy, part of the Defy team, he said something that I think is really important, which is prison is filled with people who did bad things, but prison is not filled with bad people. And that's the humanizing thing that I think is hard for people to kind of separate out, to say, like, these are humans. We all make mistakes. We all make bad decisions, particularly between the ages of 17 and 25, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't all have the capacity to change and to be different. And so I think when we're saying, look, we're just going to throw people away, lock them up, get rid of the key, it's sort of mind-boggling to think that, like, that as a society we're saying, that's the right decision, right? And so a lot of what our work is about is, one, for the folks who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, helping them see what their path can be and open up that door to transformation for them. And two, to bring to create these humanizing interactions between people who are not in prison and people who are. To say, like, look, everything you think you know about this is probably wrong. And it's not to say that everyone who comes home from prison is ready for reentry, because our system, unfortunately, is not set up that way. But it is to say that there are people, many people, who are looking for an opportunity to be different and better. And then when we don't give them that opportunity, what essentially we're saying is, sorry, eternal sentence for you, no matter what you did.
This is who you are.
Back to prison with you. Once a criminal, always a criminal. And that's that. And that is incredibly costly economically, incredibly costly at a society level. Because if you can't get a job, you're much more likely to return to criminal behavior because you need to meet your needs, right? And incredibly costly from a human level when you think about everybody who's inside is somebody's mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, right? Whatever it is. And what are the cycles that we perpetuate when we prevent them from coming home and having an opportunity?
It's interesting, and I want to talk about exactly what happens in the program. But we talked before we started the podcast. I have a friend, Tuan.
Yeah.
Tuan, if you met him and didn't know his story, you'd see a father, a husband, an entrepreneur. He has an amazing coffee brand, Viet5, and a coffee shop. He has a foundation. He's a community activist. He hires people from the community and helps them see new possibilities. He's a creative director. And just a beautiful guy, funny and creative and talented and passionate and ambitious. And then, oh, by the way, he was an immigrant from Vietnam, came here at 6 years old, great family, but he landed up going down the wrong path and he killed someone. He made a choice. He owns it.
Sure.
And he went to jail, and he got a life sentence with possibility of 15 years of parole. But the thing that struck me, and I had him as a guest, he said two things to me. One was when he first went in his head, all he was doing was he was moving his business inside. So he was just going to keep running, and he actually had a better opportunity because it was like he could control the marketplace. And the second thing was even more disturbing to me was in the beginning, until he sort of opened up to a program there, was he couldn't imagine another possibility for himself. Like,
right.
It wasn't like I'm choosing to do what I'm doing and keep doing what I'm doing and what I have done. It wasn't a choice. It was in his mind, there wasn't another alternative. And it's like, I know that's obvious, but it blew me away when he articulated it that way. And I'm assuming that that's the norm more than the exception in there. So what do you guys do in the program to change that? How does it actually work?
Yeah. So the way it works is, I should say, look, I think so many people we meet come from communities where there are generational cycles of poverty and violence and incarceration, and the path that they expect, that they understand is, I will do this. I will follow in the footsteps of my father, grandfather who was in the gang. I will probably get caught. I will do my time. I will come home. Right? Or not. Right? And that's tragically can be the path of least resistance for just far too many people. So when people come into our program, our program it has entrepreneurship that sort of sits at its core. It's like, we're teaching entrepreneurship, right? That's also a hook, right? Who wants to start their own business, right? And there's lots and lots of entrepreneurs in prison. Many of them had illegal businesses before, right? Which, same concepts there, just different context. We lead with, okay, who wants to start a business? Okay, now to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to be right with yourself. You need to know who you are and who you want to be. You need to be solving a problem for someone else. And let's talk about all the systems that you would need to build to do that. And that becomes this entree for us to start with. What are your self-limiting beliefs? Right? What do you think you can't do, and why? Why do you think you can't do that? Right? How do we push through those, and how do we address those? And self-limiting beliefs can range from I could never start my own business. Although that's not usually it, right? It's more like I can't be a good father. I can't be successful. I, whatever those things might be, right? I can't get a job, right? These are these self-limiting beliefs that we start to try to tackle head on. And then we get into things like, what does it mean to take accountability? What does it mean to make a meaningful apology? What does it mean to build relationships? How do you tell your story? And the process of going through these exercises, even the one particularly about how do you tell your story, right, which we call your personal statement, incredibly powerful, right? Because you have to, in writing, think about your past, write it down, and in a statement of like, here's where I came from, this is the stuff I did to transform, and here's who I am today, right? And that is an incredibly powerful exercise because it's part of this affirmation that they go through. And then we're moving into things like, okay, ideate a business, and what are your gifts and talents you would want to exploit for the purposes of starting a business, right? And that forces them to say like, oh, I do have those gifts and talents. I can do this. This can be my business, right? And it feels like, I think for us who aren't in prison, that feels sort of elementary. You're like, well, of course I know what I can do, right? But to our point earlier, right, when you've been told you have no gifts and talents and you will never amount to anything, that is transformational. And then when we bring volunteers in, people from the business community who join us and say, hey, let me help you with your resume. Let me help you with your personal statement. I'm going to listen to your business idea. Hey, that's a really good idea. Let me give you some suggestions on that. Our volunteers come in ostensibly to coach on those things, which they do, which is helpful, right? But the thing that every one of our entrepreneurs in training, and that's what we call people inside, the thing they remember is someone who I didn't know came to see me and they cared enough to spend the day, and therefore are like, I must be worth something. That is huge.
It's incredible. And how long is the process? And you say some of it starts inside while they're incarcerated, sometimes outside, but I got to imagine it takes time to sort of create these new beliefs and to hardwire them in and reinforce them, because what you're overcoming is something that is deeply hardwired in.
Yeah, the program lasts from 6 to 8 months inside. It's 1,200 pages of curriculum. They're meeting in class, typically twice a week. It's about 10 hours of work per week, 10 to 15 hours of work per week. So it's not like a slouch of a class. They're in there, they're doing the work. And that's kind of the beginning of the process. They finish this class. Once they come home, then we can kind of continue that support for them when they get home and try to build on what they were doing inside. So then we offer this sort of continuing supports in that post-release space with the connection to employers to the extent we have them, more workshops, and then this entrepreneurship pathway if they decide they want to build the business. And that takes a full another year if they want to go ahead and build a business with us as they come home.
And one of the things I imagine is helping the journey and particularly helping deal with the inevitable setbacks. So because that can easily drive you back.
How do you deal with no?
Right.
Right. That's something we talked about.
And all the the challenges that come with the territory. Like Twan was, poor guy's like, he's got this great brand in this great business, and he can't get an SBA loan because he doesn't have a birth certificate because he was he's born in a village in Vietnam during the war and came here, and he can't get a conventional loan because he's a convicted felon. And it's frustrating. Now he has such incredible conviction and sort of resilience, but it's frustrating. Yeah. And even if you weren't going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have, inevitably, we all do, have setbacks when you're hardwired to go, well, that's another reaffirmation of I'm not made for it. So it's easy to slip. How do you bolster them?
Yeah,
keeps the
look, I mean, I
belief.
think that's where the like sense of self becomes so important, right? How do you not take that rejection as a personal blow? Say like, okay, it must be that something's wrong with me, right? And I
Right.
think that actually ties to a lot of what we talk about when it comes to like dealing with shame, right? Because one of the things we talk about in our program, we talk a lot about shame and forgiveness and self forgiveness, as well as forgiveness of others, right? Which is, look, shame means I am my worst mistake, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what we're trying to support people through is this idea of like, look, you are not the sum of your mistakes, right? Mistakes are part of you, right? Bad choices you made are part of your past, but they don't have to define who you are, right? And that's why we don't call people convicts or ex-cons, right? We eschew that language. You are a person, you are an entrepreneur in training, right? You are not a thief. You are not a murderer, right? That's the shame talking there, right? You're labeled now. You can never get out from under that, and that is the all you'll ever be. And so if you can convert your thinking to, hey, listen, I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, I've learned a lot in my time, and I can put those skills to use. And what I am now is an entrepreneur, and I have the ability to use that power for good, right? When I label
Reframing your
myself
identity.
entrepreneur, right?
Right.
That's different. That's so different than like I label myself murderer, right? And how to, and so part of this is trying to, how do we help the rest of society start to change those labels too? So it's not ex-con, right? It is future employee, right? Talented welder, talented marketer, talented entrepreneur, right? And that is super important to do. And that, but I think that sense of self, to your question, is really important when you're dealing with setbacks. Is, hey, listen, I'm still the person that I was before, right? It's possible my business doesn't work, right? And that's actually part of the power of the program. Is we do this pitch competition at the end. People can win this pitch competition at the end. We bring
Yep.
in volunteers as judges to do this sort of Shark Tank style pitch competition. And if there's 5 winners out of a class of whatever 40, and we tell them like, listen, you might not win today. You might think the volunteers gave you feedback that you didn't think was right. Doesn't change anything. You still didn't win, right?
Right.
And so you can complain about it, you can get mad about it, but that doesn't change the circumstances. So this is life. As an entrepreneur, not every day is going to be your day. Not everybody's going to understand what you're trying to sell. And you can learn from those, and you can take the feedback, and you can think about whether you want to change something or not, right? But what you can't do is get mad about it,
Right.
right? And so, people often ask, like, why do you do a competition, right? Everybody's a winner. It's like, look, we tell them, we believe that if they finish the program, certainly they're all winners for finishing the program. It's a tough program to win. But we also think there's an important learning moment there. So like, listen, you're an entrepreneur. Not everything's going to go your way every single day. And, that's okay.
Such is life.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean you didn't finish the program. Doesn't mean you didn't work hard. Doesn't mean that we don't think you're awesome. And frankly, that every volunteer in the room, they still think you're awesome. You just didn't win the pitch competition, but you still get to graduate. We're going to celebrate you, and it's going to be awesome. And be proud, right? I think all of these things come together to start to help people form these ideas and these different patterns of thinking, right, that help them be successful when they come home.
A big part of your impact, I got to believe, is scale. And a big part of your scale is probably 2 things. One is volunteers.
Yeah.
Because you keep bringing that up. And the other is companies willing to take chances, because you said 90% are looking for jobs, 10% are looking to create a business. So there's got to be enough companies in volunteers, number one. And number 2, enough companies out there that says, I'm willing to subordinate my instinctive sort of gag reaction, which is not like, I get it. I love it. I'm applauding Defy Ventures from the sidelines. I'll even volunteer, but I'm not going to hire one of them, right?
Yeah, it's fear. It's fear.
Fear,
right?
right.
Fear and emotion. Yeah.
So how do you conquer this fear? And there's some intellectual response to that, which is the data that says these people are actually going to end up being better employees.
Yeah.
And I know I've read the material. You should talk about it. But how do we overcome that? Like, listen, hardwired. I'm just like, do I really want one of these people in my company?
Yeah. There's one way that works. Come and meet someone. Right. I mean, this is a social movement, right, that we are part of.
Right.
And there's no social movement in history that I'm aware of that ever succeeded without human interaction, whether that was voting rights or marriage rights, whatever it is, right? When you sit across from somebody, person to person, it's very difficult to look them in the eye and say, sorry, I just don't see your humanity right now. Right. And that's why it's so important for us and why I think our program is unique in that we kind of cover both the inside and the outside and the connection to opportunity and the changing of minds of people outside kind of at scale. But look, if I bring a CEO in from, McDonald's, right? Or Home Depot or Boeing, right? Home Depot actually does pretty good on the fair chance hiring stuff, but, right. Or United, right? One of your Chicago companies. How did they move? Still,
nope. Yeah, we'll call them Chicago.
All right, and you have the CEO of United to come in, and they sit across from somebody, and probably more importantly, their chief counsel and their head of HR, right? And you get the three of them inside, and they sit across from a bunch of men or women, and they have this day with them. They're like, I see that there are human beings in here who are capable of change and have something to offer my company. Right? I don't need them to walk out and say, "Oh, I'm going to hire anybody who walks across the door." And I think that is a bit of a misconception about what we call fair chance hiring. But for them to see, like, listen, we can't paint this population with a broad brush that none of them are qualified, and that they're all going to be a danger to my company. Because in fact, if they're applying for a job, some of them will be qualified. Maybe a lot of them will be qualified for different jobs in the company. And it's extraordinarily unlikely, right, that they're going to be a danger to their company. But if all you're doing is talking about the data, and I know this because I've done it, if all you're doing is hands me a white paper, like, yeah, I get this intellectually, but emotionally, hell no, right? And so the thing that's going to change that is that human interaction. That's why it's so important for us to bring people inside with us. Or, we also do these workshops virtually or in person. And, this is part of it, is the humanizing aspect of it. But as long as you view somebody as other, right, as not somehow differently human, right, or not human, not fully human, right? If you're looking at them from the perspective of criminal and not person, you can't get past it.
Right. But the important thing is you're not saying, prospective employee, give this person a handout. You're just saying to give this person a fair shake. That's all you're asking, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look,
that's a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not charity.
No.
Right? If there's this incredible business case, like, you need people to work for you, right? I'm not saying give somebody a job who isn't qualified. What I'm saying is don't exclude an otherwise qualified person from a job because of a criminal history, particularly one that happened like 20 years ago, right? And that's where the whole thing is like, well, they did this X, right? Okay, how old are they? They were 23. How old are they now? 39. Okay, well, who the hell were you when you were 21? Right? Are you the same person that you were when you were 21? So give this person a fair chance. I'm not saying don't ask them what has happened between the time of their incarceration and now. Absolutely. But make that part of your process. And that's this whole part. That's another piece of our work, which is advocacy and support and and technical support for companies that want to engage in fair chance hiring. So like, look, there are processes in place, and here's what they are.
Right, because you provide support. Because one of my other podcasts, Trish and Nicole, they founded this fantastic company, Everybody Eat. It's a snack food for people who have like any one of 13 different food sensitivities. Yeah. And I brought them on to talk about starting the company.
Yeah.
And when we finished recording, we were just shooting the shit. And they were like, I go, what didn't we talk about? And they go, oh, you probably didn't talk about our employees. I'm like, they told me the story. It was like we had a whole other episode of the podcast, and they hire employees who have a history in the system or been touched by, and they're not doing it as charity. They're doing it because these are great people who are great employees. Now, part of what they do is they provide the wraparound support to these people, and they do all kinds of things in terms of helping them open bank accounts and making sure that they don't get screwed over in the process and charge exorbitant things, and helping them go and negotiate a lease for a car, and dealing with transportation and all of the things. Am I to take it as you provide some of that infrastructure and support for these people so that there is that backup plan, or if you will?
Yeah, 100%. So if they're coming through our program and they're our graduates, all the things you just mentioned, right? Help them find a job, help them get a bank account, get all their vital documents. That's stuff that we do in our post-release program. I would love to meet these people. It sounds like they could be great partners for us, and I think we could
incredible.
Send them people who would be, great employees for them. But yeah, that I think for a lot of companies, let's be real, like not a lot of companies can do all those things, and they don't want to. Like, I just need employees, right? Great. Work with a partner like us. We can provide all the supports that they need. All you got to do is give them a workplace that is going to offer them a place where they can belong, and not feel like every day when they walk into work, they have to worry about somebody finding them out. Because it's a tough road. It's a tough road.
Right. Tough deal. So we're getting close to the end. Time flies when you're covering stuff like this. What if people are listening?
Yeah.
Where do they need to go to knock on the door to be useful to this? Because it's like, this is a no-brainer.
Absolutely. www.defyventures.org. You can, there's a button there that says volunteer, and you can find our upcoming events there. If they, they can email me directly at andrew@defyventures.org. That's DEFYVENTURES.org, and I'll send them I'll route them to the right place. Check out our website, sign up for our newsletter. If people feel compelled to give, we are a nonprofit. We do operate on the generosity of individuals, corporations, foundations. If there are companies out there like, hey, I'd like to learn more about fair chance hiring, we'd love to run a workshop for you around just an exposure workshop on kind of the implicit, explicit biases associated. And a plug on that is if you think you're doing DEI and you're not thinking about criminal history, you're not doing DEI. So let's talk. But, come and volunteer. We've got, we're in California, Washington, Illinois, Wisconsin, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and we're getting up and running in Pennsylvania. We'll be in the Philly area by summer, with hopefully more states on the way.
Oh, you heard it there. Andrew Glazier from Defy Ventures. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on arguably short notice. You and I will be talking because I'm definitely going to be volunteering, but it's an amazing program that you're involved in, that you're leading, that you're driving. And I'd like to keep touching base with you and bring it back. I'd like to, if you're okay, I'd love to feature some of your graduates.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
And have them talk about the experience. Because there's great success stories.
Yeah. Particularly, we've got all over the country, but we've got a couple of great stories in the Chicago area. Would love to introduce you to. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
Amen. Well, thanks very much, Andrew. I appreciate it. It's been amazing talking with you.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit ScreenDragon.com to see our software in action.